going to get into chapter 14 right now, entitled The List. Upon my journeys and upon my searches of looking for people of African descent in the Bible, I came across, um, I came across this list. And this is pretty much going to be uh, how do I put it? An inquiry into I guess specifically the Hebrew Israelite religious community. Up until this point, if you're a person who kind of ascribes to this, then a lot of this knowledge is nothing new to you. Now, a lot of the knowledge coming up is going to be new to you, but thus far, it's pretty much par for the course. And when we look at this list, I'm just going to tell you the list, and then I'm going to go along with a lot of the problems that I have with it. It goes by the 12 tribes, and the first tribe is Judah, which would be Negroes, African Americans, right? Going by byword, we still don't know how to exactly point us, but Benjamin, which is West Indians, Levi, Haitians, Simeon, Dominicans, Zebulon, Guatemala or Panama, Ephraim, Puerto Ricans, Manasseh, Cubans, Gad, North American Indians, Reuben, Seminole Indians, Naphtali, Argentina and Chile, um, Asher, Colombia and Uruguay, and Issachar, Mexicans. And when we look at this, first of all, this list, um, I'm just gonna get into it. The first section is where's Joseph? Um, pretty much my main inquiry is where biblically did this specific list come from? And under where's Joseph, if you read Revelation 7:5 through 8, there are the 12 tribes of Israel are listed once again, and they're all supposed to contribute 12,000 each to make up 140,000, and in that list, Joseph is one of them. But obviously, if you go through this list again, there's no Joseph in this specific list. And I would ask where he's at. And some may say, well, Ephraim and Manasseh, those are Joseph's kids. So he's representative in there too. But here's the thing. If you go back to the prophecy stated for Joseph, the his children were given um, two separate tribes. So it would be Joseph, Ephraim, and Manasseh. So it's supposed to be three, right? And I know I'm kind of if and here's the thing: if you're one of those people, don't really, you're not really, just stick with it for right now. And we'll get back to this later. But the next section I want to get into is Simeon and Levi. Um, Pretty much in Genesis 49, there were certain prophecies, given, and for what it's worth, God, or there was anger with Simeon and Levi. I'm just gonna read it pretty much out of my book. In his statement, he says that they were to be scattered among the other tribes of Israel, as to leave the impression that they will not have their own lands. So Simeon and Levi are supposed to be scattered amongst the tribes. They're not supposed to have their own specific land that's like this is for them. This is for they're not supposed to have that. But when we look back, Simeon is represented by Dominicans, and Levi is represented by the Haitians, but they're not supposed to have their own lands according to Genesis 49. But even then, when we read, this cannot be the case, because when they were in Israel, Simeon was given a portion of land. So if during this time they're not supposed to have land, right? But Simeon was given land pretty much after this, then I guess if you believe that the Bible is a book of prophecy, then what we're looking at here is sometime down the line from this point, they're not supposed to have a specific land in a time that is not written about. And that would mean nowadays, I would assume, right? I mean, it's been 2,000 years or so. I mean, what other better time, right? But it's a bit confusing. that's why that's why I feel like I had to address this because I was confused. Um, and I'm just going to go on. One may also assert that the dispersal of Simeon and Levi could have happened sometime in the confusion of the slave trade. But then again, the same can be said of all the other tribes. So when were these tribes assigned to these designated areas? Is my question. Who separated them? It could not have been themselves because they lost their identity, remember? And who placed the boundaries on these territories? Was it God, or was it man? Who then chose to associate these specific tribes to a specific landmass? How are they able to make these decisions? And where is any proof of this particular aspect, whether in biblical or otherwise? And I say or otherwise because obviously, biblically speaking, I'm not seeing it. So, what other source can you bring up to tell me um, all of this other stuff? Um, let's see. And another thing, when we look at Deuteronomy 33, Moses is because I mean, there's multiple lists, and I'm going pretty much going through each list. In Deuteronomy 33, Moses is dying, and he's gonna give uh, you know, his blessings and whatnot. And one thing I highlighted, first of all, he also gave blessings to 13 tribes, but left out Simeon, which is an odd thing because it's Moses' final blessing, right? So if they're saying, well, this list comes from Moses, well, it doesn't come from Moses because Moses left out Simeon, and Simeon is listed here. You see, um, by this evidence, it is clear that the source of this list did not originate from Moses, being that this list recognizes Simeon and Moses did not. So, I mean, pretty much I'm asking, biblically speaking, where can I find this? Where can I find this specific list? You know, which leads to another problem that I had with this list, and we'll go on to mud. Um, I've been on pretty much both sides of the fence as far as people telling me where exactly the lineage is counted. And I've heard different arguments, right? Some say, well, the lineage comes down through the woman. Some say it comes down through the man. And well, what the Bible really says is this and that. And just to appease everybody, right? Um, this section is kind of just designed to um, it's kind of like a hypothetical, right? So I'm just gonna go through it real quick. Like, let's say that I am from the tribe of Judah, and I marry somebody from uh, Levi. I marry a Haitian or whatever, and we have a kid. Um, is that kid part of the tribe of Levi or Judah? And vice versa. Let's say that I'm a woman and I'm from Judah, and the man or whatever is from Haiti or whatever. Like, where does the kid belong? Okay, now along those lines, what if that kid married and had a kid with somebody from Cuba or Cuba? Where where does that kid identify with? You know what I'm saying? If we're going by these specific landmass and everything, like who determines that, and how do you determine that? And where biblically can you point to me and say this is how it's determined? If not, then it's not biblical. Which I'm not saying is necessarily wrong, but it's not. If we're talking about what's in the Bible and what's not, then this clearly isn't. And another main problem that I have is that if you're here in the Western Hemisphere, I say particularly in the United States, um, we're already mixed in with everybody else. And I want to point out, we're mixed in with the Spanish, the Portuguese, the indigenous Americans, and Caucasian, Europeans, etc. Right? And let's say for instance, the European. Um, the quote unquote Gentile? What is the procedure for I guess, an Israelite person um, marrying or having a child with a Gentile? Is that kid, um, cut off or whatever from this bloodline or whatever? Is that kid made, um, separate? And whether it's the mom that's a Gentile or the father that's a Gentile, doesn't really matter. I'll say it goes both ways, right? Um, and my thing is, if you say, well, that kid is not a legitimate child of Israel because he's mixed in or whatever like that, then I would also like to say, well, if he's not or she's not, whatever that child is, then whoever comes after that child wouldn't be either. And my problem with this is, if we particularly look at slavery here in the U.S., we're already mixed in. I mean, we talk about, white people go around talking about one part French and this and that and da 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 da. Well, we're probably more mixed in than they are. And a lot of it is due to, some of it is rape, a lot of it is intermixing stuff. Like, even though I have French and German and all kinds of stuff, like my grandpa's name is Ansel. I have like four Ansels in my line, and it all stems from white guy. So in essence, if that's the case, then I don't think there are very few African Americans that can even be considered in this discussion of being a part of Israel, because by force or what have you, a lot of us, even then, right now that we a lot of them are free to choose or or whatever, we're all mixed in. We may look like this, but I got a lot of stuff going on in here. So uh, that's just something just to chew on. Exactly. We're gonna go on to the next section, which is obvious question, right? If we're talking about the list, and we're talking about uh, Indians in Argentina and all this other stuff, then how exactly did they get there? Um, and the Bible does provide a reference to that. And even then, I'm not going to go into the exact history of the formation of the current King James Bible that we know now, but here's what I can tell you. Before, it was bigger, and there was maybe 13 or 14 other books that were in there that for whatever reason were taken out. And pretty much when we look at the Bible, I'm gonna say the story starts off in 1 Kings 11 through 12. This recounts a story in which the tribes of Israel were split, with Judah and the Levites controlling the south, and the rest of the tribes of Israel controlling the north. During this time, there are many different rulers for both sides, as well as battles amongst themselves and other nations. The Bible records in 2 Kings 17 that the northern tribes were eventually taken captive by the Assyrians, right? So, and pretty much after the northern tribes, the other nine, besides Judah and a part of Levi, pretty much when they were taken away, the Bible doesn't say anything more about them. So what about their story? Where do they come from? And the Apocrypha, those 12, maybe 13, 14 books that were taken out, those were the books that describe those other tribes. So people talk about the lost tribes. Um, where they say the Jews, well, if you're a Jew or a Jew, Judean or whatever, you only have, that's only one tribe. Where are the other 11, right? Or where are the other tribes? And so this is kind of dig into a little bit of the Apocrypha. If you're familiar with the Apocrypha, you can go to Second Esdras 13 verses 40 through 46. And if you don't have it, I already have it in the book in a section right here, so you don't have to really turn to it. But I'm gonna read it for you. And excuse me, I might butcher some things, but those are okay. Those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Osea the king, whom Salmanasar the king of Assyria led away captive, and he carried them over the waters, and so okay, over the waters, and so came they into another land. But they took counsel among themselves, they that would leave the multitude of the heathen, and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt, that they might there keep their statutes which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into the Euphrates by the narrow places of the river, for the Most High had showed them signs for them, and still the flood, till they were passed over. For though that country there was a great way to go, namely of a year and a half, and the same region is called Arsareth. Then dwelt they there until the latter time, and now when they shall begin to come. So pretty much these other tribes took it upon themselves to leave. They went out of the Euphrates, went down around Africa, and then they went to Arsareth, which is I guess South America or the Americas in general. They say this is a place where man had not dwelt or whatever, but you look scientifically, well, yeah. Um, but you could see how this is possible, right? I mean, if you look at the technology of the day, from the Euphrates in the Middle East to go all the way around to it takes about a year and a half. That they've done studies or whatever on it. It does take about a year and a half. And when we look at Second Chronicles chapter 9 verse 21, now we're going back into the regular Bible, right? For the kings, this would be Solomon's, ships went to Tarshish, Spain, with servants of Hiram. Every 3 years once came the ships of Tarshish, bringing gold and silver, ivory, apes, and peacocks. So pretty much what this is saying is that, every 3 years, Solomon would go up to Spain and, you know, trade and all this other kind of good stuff. But like I said, every 3 years, because if it takes a year and a half to get there, and a year and a half to get back, then we could see that 3 year that 3 year cycle. And this is also very plausible because the Bible records that Solomon had a navy, and I'm gonna read it for you. And King Solomon made a navy of ships on the shore of the Red Sea in the land of Edom, and Hiram sent the navy his servants, shipmen, that knowledge of the sea, which with the servants of Solomon. So he's got a navy, he's got a guy that knows the seas and knows maps and everything like that, and that's what that is. So, I mean, as far as what they're saying in this book, or as far as this list or whatever, it is possible. It is possible, and this is what leads me to the next section, which is America, the new Africa. And the reason why I say this is because, yes, even biblically speaking, it tells you that, some of the tribes were were captive and they came over. I'm agreeing with all this stuff. My only disagreement, um, my only disagreement is that we don't need um, anybody else other than African looking people to make this case. And I'm just biblically speaking, we don't need to include, we'll say Indians, those of the African origins, Hispanic without African origins, people that we would consider the indigenous people. We don't need that. If you know a little bit about black, I'll say history, which you're going to get a little bit of here right now, then you'll understand why. Okay, and I know there's some people that are like, what? I thought that, especially probably some Hebrew Israelite people that are just, yeah. But we're going to get into this. Um, let's see, the Israelites were said to have been compared to the Ethiopians, Egyptians, and Libyans, etc., essentially pure Africans, which these Indo-American peoples do not portray. In fact, they more closely share a resemblance to the Assyrian people who stripped the Israelites of their land and thus became the reason for why the Israelites had to search for a new land in the first place. So there we go. In order to prove this point, the only way that one can justify this is if they could say, you have to pretty much emphatically prove that there were Israelites or Jews in these ancient times or whatever that looked like anybody else that was not African. And if we're talking about Indians, or Native Americans as we know them, You have to prove that there were people, that there were Israelites in the Bible that looked like, um, pretty much anybody else other than blacks or whites at the time. And that's, I haven't found it. Maybe you can, but I haven't found it. But one of the verses people like to use is Hosea, excuse me, 7:8, which states that Ephraim hath he hath mixed himself among the people. Ephraim is a cake not turned. And pretty much when you think about a cake not turned, normally you have obviously a cake, and in ancient times, you'd heat it or whatever. So at the bottom, it would be uh, black, like dark, because that was exposed to the most heat, and the top would be light because it's exposed to less heat. So if you don't turn the cake, then you could see dark to light. So that's what it means as a cake not turned. And some people say, well, that's what it is. you know it's telling you right there that they came in all different. And here's my thing: I'm not sitting here, when I look at race or what have you, I'm not looking at just color, because black people come in all different shapes and sizes. Like I tell you, black people are the beginnings of humanity. Black people hold the genes to every other race. So you can have albino blacks. You can have black people that are like my shade, a little bit darker, lighter. Like my fiance is dark, darkity dark, 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 dark. Love her to death. Love it though. And then I have two nephews. You've probably seen pictures of them or whatever. My little brothers that are white. They even have like gray eyes, like dark, silver eyes, and hazel eyes or whatever. And even then, right, you can take there's dark Indians, there's dark Hispanics or whatever. And when you look at them, you could still tell, like, okay, well, obviously you're Indian, you're not an African, or you're and so it goes to different levels and different dimensions. But now I'm kind of rambling on. I need to get on to the next thing. But when we look at Ephraim in this specific verse, it's just one. You can't show me the whole tribe. You can just show me just one. And there are some lists or whatever that state that Ephraim isn't even, his tribe's not even really a part of Israel, according to some of the, some of the lists that have been put out in the Bible. But even then, you have to show me where everybody has been mixing or whatever, which kind of leads me to my point was, okay, well, if Ephraim, if the tribe of Ephraim was not mixing, then they would be a cake turned, right? And a cake turned would mean that they would be evenly black all the way through. So my point is still proven. Uh, the Israelites, the Jews, the tribe of Ephraim or whatever is essentially a black tribe. It's only when they mix with everybody else that they become not what they are, not, lighter skinned or whatever. Um, but even then, I don't think this is the best verse to kind of prove the ethnicity of other people or whatever, because when we look at the same verse in the new in the NLT, it says that the people of Israel mingle with godless foreigners, making themselves as worthless as a half-baked cake. So, this isn't the best. Like I said, it's not the best verse that you want to go with. Um, but even going down, because we talk about Indians, right? We talk about all this other good stuff. Well, what about the, this and that? Well, let's get into that, right? Because even then, when we look at the Cherokees and the Seminoles, which would be characterized by the tribe of Gad and Reuben, according to that list that we just talked about, obviously those are black Indians. And when we look at Hosea 12:9, which states, "And I will make you live in tents again, as you did each year at the festival of shelters, as in the days of your appointed feasts." So pretty much tents, right? I mean, when we look at Indians, we're looking at nomadic people. They're always in tents, they're always moving, all this other good stuff. Go down a little bit further, Isaiah 65:11. But ye are they that forsake the Lord, that forget my holy mountain, and prepare a table, a feast for a troop, and that furnish the drink offering wine unto that number. Therefore I will number you to the sword, and ye shall bow down to the slaughter. Right? So pretty much what he's saying is, you go out of your way and you prepare these feasts for these foreigners, and because of that, I'm going to ensure that you get squashed out. Doesn't that sound? Isn't that the Thanksgiving narrative? I mean, in a very general way. I mean, isn't that the basis of it all? You know. Um, but when we talk about Indians or whatever, there's already we don't need, there's already an establishment of black Indians here that don't look like that look just like Africans. I'm gonna read a section. One only needs to research the native tribes of the Osage of the Great Plains of the U.S., the Pimos of Arizona, the Yucats of California, as well as the Blackfoot, Cherokee, Choctaw, Mohegan, Yamasee, and especially the Washita. Now, the Washita, though, that's probably the one that you might want to dig into. Indians, to see that there were Africans in America before there were African Americans. And even then, when we talk about South America, well, that was North America. Well, what about, Argentina and whatnot? Well, when you look at South America, look at the Olmec civilizations, right? When we look in, just click Olmec heads, you're telling me that these people left a 8 feet, 55-ton rock heads with African features and Nubian braids, the same stuff that you find in Nubia and in the Black Lands here in South America, and they left dozens of these things, you know, African presence. And as far as that's concerned, look at Lucia. They made a sculpture or whatever of the facial features and structure or whatever of the first person here in the Americas. And it's a black woman. The black woman is the first person, I'll say, in the Americas. It's all there. It's all, just do a little bit of research on it. I'm giving you the point to go to it. Um, but pretty much my conclusion to that is there's two different types of people inhabiting the world of ancient Americas. One of them was undeniably African. So, and with that, we're going to go on to the next section, which is blurred lines. And pretty much what happens now is people, they'll take these little, I don't know, they'll take little things and they'll try to make it seem like they're a part of this thing without actually taking into account all of the um, everything that we've said before. And one of the things that they say is it's a Bible verse in Deuteronomy 21:23 and Galatians 3:13. Cursed is anyone who hangeth on a tree. And when we originally look at this text, this had everything to do with the land, and it had to do with criminals. So if you were a criminal, you were cursed because you did bad stuff. Hang on a tree. And in the original, it's talking about the land as well. Like if you were hung in Israel, then the land was cursed and stuff like that. Just do a little bit of your research. You'll find that out. Um, but even then, they say, "Cursed is anyone who hangeth on a tree." Well, let's look at the Romans. They hung everybody. They hung everybody on cross. Like we think Jesus is the only one. No, they had miles. They literally had miles of crosses at one point, and just like they hung entire armies, right? So by this knowledge, by this logic, anyone who's ever been hung on a tree, then um, their whole people has been cursed, which is it's ludicrous because then everybody is, and then we just got to discount um, all the rest of the signs. So at the end of the day, uh, and I have a lot more to say about this, but I'm just going to read from right here. The truth is, any person can go back into their people's history and find bits and pieces of hardships that line up with the curses of Israel. But you got to fit the entire description. And when we look at Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28, God was talking to the whole tribe of Israel, not just Judah, Levi, but everyone. So, it's pretty much one of those things where if you don't fit the marks, you know, nobody was excluded. This goes to everybody in the tribe of Israel. So, and even then, when I do look at this, when I do look at this list, obviously Negroes, African Americans, they're blacks, West Indians, blacks, Haitians, Dominicans, black. There's blacks in Guatemala. There's blacks in Puerto Rico. There's black Cubans. There's black North American Indians, black Seminole Indians, black people in Argentina and Chile, black people in Colombia, Uruguay. There's black Mexicans, right? Look at the Oaxacas. Like there's black people all over the place. It's just how you choose to see them. Um, but with that, I can go a little bit further, but I hope I'm making things a little bit clearer. We're gonna go on to the next section, which is not down for the count. Let me see. And this is pretty much the section where after I present all this evidence, this is probably where someone's kind of sitting back saying, well, you know what? Well, that might be all good and the signs or whatever, but you know what? I could still be spiritually an Israelite. I could spiritually be a Jew. I could be, I could be, thrown in the mix or whatever. Like I could still be that. And the answer is no. And I mean, we're just gonna get into it now. And most of the times when they think about this stuff, they think about the New Testament and they think about what Paul's writings and everything's were. And I'm gonna break some of those down. I might not be able to cover them all, but I'm gonna break some of them down. Um, when we look at Galatians 3:6 through 19. It is true that Paul's statement, he states that by faith all can be counted as sons of Abraham. This is true. They say, well, I'm a son of Abraham, blessings and all this other kind of good stuff. Well, let's see what the Bible says really about being a son or a daughter of Abraham from the mouth of none other than Jesus himself. And ye shall know the truth, and this truth shall make you free. And by the way, I'm reading out of John 8:31 through 59. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I shortened it down. But, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. They answered him, we are Abraham's seed, and were never in bondage to any man. How sayest thou, ye be made free? I, Jesus, know that you are Abraham's seed, but ye seek to kill me, because my word hath no place in you. They answered and said unto him, Abraham is our father. Jesus saith unto them, if you were Abraham's children, ye would do the works of Abraham. Then they said, art thou greater than our father Abraham? And then Jesus says, your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day. So they talk about the sons of Abraham. Even then, right? As Paul would say, the spiritual sons, not literal, but the spiritual sons, according to the Bible. And then we're talking about these people who are not just spiritual, but the literal. What the thing is, Jesus is saying that you're right. You're absolutely right. You are. You're exactly who you say you are. And what does that mean? Nothing. I mean, it doesn't mean I'm telling you. This is what Jesus said. This ain't me. These people are Abraham sees both Jesus and they acknowledge this. But here's the thing: you could be a part of Abraham's seed and still not be an Israelite and still not be a Jew. There's two different things, because they said, bondage was not, we've never been enslaved to any man. Well, if you're a Jew or an Israelite, bondage was clearly a part of the folklore, a part of the legends, a part of who pretty much they say they were. In the Bible, they've been in bondage to, the Egyptians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and the Greeks. And matter of fact, during this time, the time that this very conversation was said to have recorded to have been happened, they were they were under the control of Rome as this was happening. So, what more? And you still deny that you've never been in bondage or been enslaved. So obviously these people were sons of Abraham, but these weren't Israelites. Besides, when we look at when we look at Abraham, he had 7 other children, and each of these children had descendants. So there's plenty of people in this world that not just spiritually, but physically can say, well, I'm a child of Abraham. Doesn't mean much. I mean, as far as this text is concerned, it's still Israel that has all the covenants and all the everything, that still has all the prophets and the everything. It's still Israel's. But then here's where people say, Paul also states that, all can be grafted onto the tree of Israel. This is true. You can take any tree and cut a little piece of it off, and then you can take a branch from another tree and tie it on there. You can graft it on there, and that branch will continue to grow. It'll continue to feed off the tree. That's just nature. It's going to happen. The problem is, if you take a branch from a different tree, it's not going to produce the same fruit that the original trees being grafted onto can produce. Like, you're not going to take a olive branch, put it on a fig tree, and that branch is going to create figs. That's not the way it happens. It's still going to be what it is. It's just grafted on. And even then, the Bible records of 2 Gentiles, and I talked about Cornelius earlier, but Stephen and Cornelius, they were both Gentiles, but they were both acknowledged by God. They were both placed in God's favor. They were both seen. I mean, for what it's worth, they were cool white folks. They were cool white boys, but at the same time, they were not acknowledged as being Israelites. They did not acknowledge themselves as being Israelites. They say, look, this is, I'm a white guy, but, what y'all doing is pretty cool. And I could dig that. Fine. That's cool. And they still partake in everything. But, it's one of those things where you can't just mosey on in and then, I mean, there's still a lot more. And there's a lot more that I'm kind of leaving out, but it's already been like 37 minutes into this thing. So it's already been pretty long. But for what it's worth from that, I'm just going to wrap it up from here. We are done with the section, people. We're done. We're going on to the next section, section 3, deeper overstanding. Chapter 15, is it really an Israelite? But for right now, we got to wrap it up. This is Standard Reason, Blacks in the Bible. I am Raday Leavy, signing off, saying peace, love.